All right, so this is going to be kind of like a preface, like this is not necessarily the working session, this is just like the bare basics to understand what timelines are, or at least kind of like just sort of the foundation of timelines so that everything moving forward makes sense. Timelines are really in the sense of like a physical matrix, they're essentially a beginning, a middle, and an end. So if you are a channeler, chances are you are picking up on different timelines. For me, when I read client timelines, it's all about different energetic trajectories, which is also another great description of a timeline. But generally it has a beginning, middle, and end. It has a point A, it has a point B. So there is an inception of energy that is created or started. It does something, right? Because energy is always moving, it's never stopped or stagnated. At least in a vibrational sense, and then it ultimately comes to an end, or there is a conclusion. What's really interesting to dive into about timelines in particular is that I have a lot of questions about how timelines are started and how they end. Do they cross each other? Do they intersect each other? Do they combine? Do they split, etc.? And I'll also talk a little bit more about why that's important, how it's relevant, and how you may recognize or understand it in everyday life. So some of the most popular different types of timelines, at least that I perceive, are love, job and career, self-development-ish, kind of just like personal things that we work on, and then home and geolocation energy. This is probably just the tip of the iceberg. I would say that realistically there's a ton of different timelines that we're working with daily, right? Like if you take your car out and you go to a destination, that's technically the timeline, but typically people don't necessarily want to know about those kinds of things, and chances are there's a lot less universal interjection. In other words, there's not like soul contracts, there's not a lot of different people, places, and things which are interacting with these energetic trajectories. So well, I mean, at times, I'll say it loosely. So yeah, there's just like a lot less energy behind them. And obviously if you're coming in for like a psychic mediumship reading, these are more so the things that you want to know about. But because they have more substantial energy overall, they're quite easy to read. So of course, when we're looking at these timelines, we have a beginning, we have something going on in the middle. And hey, this middle could be a day, it could be 5 years, it could be whatever it is, but then we ultimately sort of have an end. So great ways to like understand what this means physically is in love. This could be the inception of a relationship, this could be the duration, this could be the end. For home and geolocation energy, this could be you moving to a certain house at a certain location, you living there here in the middle, and then of course you exiting. Same thing with job and career, getting a new job and exiting that job. There's multiple reasons why you want to be aware of your timelines and sort of like intuitively connected to them. One is alignment. The more aligned or, I guess integrated into your timelines, the better it's going to be for you, right? Because there's this delicate balance of sort of our free will as well as our fate. And I say that primarily because the fate, in question is really like our subconscious, our higher self, like what we sort of agreed to do and be here in this lifetime before we incarnated here. At least that's my sort of intentional belief. But if that's not how you perceive the world, there's absolutely still this sense of a conscious and a subconscious, right? Like in terms of the major things that we're doing in our life, it's driven by our subconscious. What are your goals, your ideals, your values? Your conscious self is at times very aligned, but it can also be at war in the sense that it's making decisions which are contrary to laddering up to these things. And there's a lot of reasons why that happens. It could be through fear, it could be through just any sort of proactive avoidance. I mean, to be honest, it's like fear is like the general umbrella, and then it's just like smaller things stemming from that. But alignment is just going to be particularly helpful, so you know what's going on, you like have a general sense of the beginning, middle, and end, and you can help make this as worthwhile as you can. I would argue that timelines in a sense are a learning lesson, right? Like there is an intention for the creation, an intention for the duration, and the intention for the end. I think that this is why a lot of people get caught up with repeating their own patterns, because they're not really getting the point. They're not understanding what kind of a timeline they're on. Maybe they're even scared that the timeline is going to go on for too long. Maybe they're scared it's going to be too short, right? Like there could be a lot of different things going on. So in a way, we sort of at times detach ourselves from these timelines, which is never really good, because again, the result is going to be us perpetuating it. knowledge, of course, just kind of like falls into this, of course. Like I think that with your own life and your own self, knowledge is power. A lot of people tend to think that metaphysical aspects and parts of our life are like super witchy. To be honest, I feel like a lot of times those people are in a sense of denial because they don't really want to know. Of course, you know, it's one thing to be surprised and delighted in this lifetime. It's another thing to be entirely ignorant for why you're here. If you are entirely ignorant for why you're here on this planet, and you know, in regards to what your purpose is, you're going to suffer a lot. And then of course we can have the foresight, right? So, you know, and this is like, they're all three kind of like interacting very closely with each other. But for example, if I'm kind of like aware of the trajectory and the duration of my timeline, I can potentially anticipate the ending. I can anticipate the new timeline. And a lot of times that can be really broad and really vague. Again, you're not getting 100% of the story because you still have your own free will at the end of the day, right? So it can just be extremely helpful to kind of like align and know more information about these timelines, your own personal timelines. Okay, so what is the best way that you can do that? In my opinion, it's of course like intuition development. Affirmations and intentions are also kind of like paired in with this. I should have written that down, but a lot of times we just sort of don't want to know, right? So if we aren't asking and we don't want to know, we're not going to know. So putting forth that effort of acknowledgement and acceptance is going to be really helpful. I say this kind of loosely to receive psychic readings in regards to these topics. I think that this can sort of like break the ice, and if you do resonate with it, that's amazing and that's great. I mean, that's kind of weird for me to say as someone who reads for clients, but I think if you're like super new to this process, it will likely be really overwhelming if you don't know anything about it and you're seeking out like perceived truths from another channeler, because, you know, first of all, it could be 100% right and that will really startle you, but it could also be, who knows, maybe 100% wrong depending on who is reading you, and that could just kind of like make you feel super scared and uneasy, and that's not really the point here. Okay, let's move on to questions about timelines. Like, what actually kind of are they? How do they work? And I don't know, there's just still so much mystery surrounding timelines. So let's start with it. The basics, like what are timelines? I'm just gonna write down a bunch of keywords, I think. Timelines are energy. I'm gonna almost just say perceived beginning, middle, end. Hopefully people know what that is. I feel like also timelines are, they're definitely only like appropriate for our matrix reality, right? Like at least like our understanding of them. What else do I feel like timelines are? I feel like they have an inception and like what's the opposite of inception or creation? Destruction? Yeah. That may be like a little bit of a dramatic word, but I feel like that pretty much, that sums it up. Okay, so looking at this now, I feel like just like perceived beginning, middle, and end of energy is like the best explanation. These just kind of seem like extras. So I feel like what we talked about is definitely aligned. Now we're curious about how timelines work. So let's like draw some timelines. Okay, so maybe these are like our different areas of our life. But then that's kind of narrowing it down to just our timelines. Maybe we can start there. All right, so maybe these are our timelines. So this is like 1 category, 2 category, 3 category, 4, kind of like love, job, career, like whatever. So can they interact with each other? I feel like no. I feel like they're all running parallel paths to each other. I feel like they can't really interact. obviously like people, places, and things in our life can interact, but like for some reason I feel like the trajectory is just like too siloed and too strong for them to interact. So the question is, what happens when they end? A new one starts? Because then that's really interesting, like, how do they start and end? I'm almost wanting to go into like how they end before they start, which is kind of interesting. So like, is another one just created when it ends? Because then there's kind of like space, right? Because say, for example, you have like a love timeline. There's beginning, middle, end, and then what happens after the end? Like, how is one just created is the question. I feel like through manifestation, right? Maybe there's like a spark or an idea. Because there has to be an inception or a conception of energy. I feel like that's really validating the power of manifestation. So we've got one that eventually ends. But my better question is, why does it end? Maybe there's just not enough energy or manifestation behind it. Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe there's like a siphoning of like resources, or our higher selves in some way, shape, or form kind of like nix it, which is kind of interesting. So manifestation, idea, energetic support in the beginning, siphoning of energetic resources, whether that be from ourselves or from whoever, whatever is helping us. And I do feel like there's some kind of like universe magic tied up with this. Interesting. I wonder what causes the timeline. Like, if there's an energetic creation of the timeline, like, for example, in this love one, like, are we creating how much time it takes? I think yes, because I feel like the inception of the energy, like, obviously if it's like your, like, whatever it is, idea is that you want to have like a life partner, like clearly that is just like automatically going to give you like a larger timeline than a shorter one, or a smaller one. That to me makes sense. And then obviously like things can be kind of changed and shifted, because like I know from my own experience I tend to predict timelines, but they're not always perfect, right? Because when I'm predicting the timeline, which is also something interesting, I am perceiving the person who is like incepting, creating it, or is affecting, but also other elements or aspects of the universe, right? So like if it is a love connection, it would be this other person's timeline, or anything else which is like associated with it. And so I open myself up to do that. It's like, can it not be recreated is like the question, because I'm also curious, like, okay, say you have a love timeline, like what if at one point in time you're just not interested in being in a relationship? But that's an even greater question, because love, is like so beyond just romantic relationship, right? Like it's beyond any sort of like human relationship. It's just sort of like base level existence and understanding. So I wonder if everybody just has like built-in timelines. Like, is there even something higher level than job, career? Maybe there's like a purpose timeline. Maybe there's a love timeline. Maybe there's like self-development timelines. Like maybe you're required to have these timelines so long as you exist here on Earth. That is definitely a really interesting theory. I think another interesting topic is, how much control do you have over these timelines ending, right? And I'm not talking about you as a person, because like ultimately you do have control, but like how much control does your conscious self have? I think that if you can span beyond any sort of fear negative energy or doubt, you may ultimately have full control, right? Like, I don't know, it's hard because like there are things that I feel are predestined. Like I do feel like there's like a destiny involved in like who you marry and who your life partner and like purpose is. But like what happens if that fails, right? Like, I don't know. I almost don't know if I've ever been in a situation like that like there is a failure of a destined situation. What is also really interesting, which I want to bring up, is that this is just like one example, but like when you have an extremely energetically powerful purpose, like a lot of kind of healers have this, I find that there's so much energy supporting and backing them. And so a lot of times it's very difficult for them to fail. And in a timeline sense, it may also be difficult for them to switch or change their timeline. So that's kind of interesting, and I almost don't even know if that's a positive or a negative, right? Like, do you want to have more autonomous control but maybe have less energetic support and impact? Or do you want to have more energetic support and impact but maybe feel a sense of less free will and less control? And I think that maybe this can change and shape and shift a little bit throughout your life, right? Why couldn't it, or why wouldn't it? What's also an interesting question is how much influence other people have over your timelines. I think that also may come down to how energetically strong you are versus how energetically strong they are. But what's interesting, and I didn't really expect, is energetic strength when it comes to timelines. And I'm not talking about necessarily like strength to carry your own timelines. Maybe that's part of it, but I also feel like strength to transmute energy is like really particularly important. And I only say that because people who tend to go against the universe have a lot of difficulty. They don't have a lot of success because, again, there's this sort of like subconscious divine movement that's going on. I think the relationship between our conscious self and subconscious divine movement is really quite complex, and I almost feel like maybe there's like some kind of a feedback loop. And I also feel like that feedback loop where it takes time to manifest things is one, probably why a lot of people tend to get overly frustrated in the process, but also why it takes like a lot of time for things to kind of change, right? Because like there's this energetic feedback loop, and I talk about that a lot, how your reality isn't really your reality because your energy is constantly recreating your reality, and the physical matrix can't change like that, right? So like if you go through this wild experience where your energy is like drastically changed, your environment and your physical sort of existence is going to take some time to catch up. So it's not unusual to have a situation where you've gone through a really huge energetic shift, things are really stagnant, and then something changes like quite after. And I think that this can have like a couple of months of an effect, right? I oftentimes say that the like smallest or shortest sort of like energetic sort of like transition or changeover is like at least 2 weeks, right? So yeah. So we've kind of talked about our own timelines, and I think that that's pretty well covered. Now I'm kind of interested in other timelines, like your timelines in relationship to the universe. Okay, so say for example that this is one of my timelines. Maybe like we also have just sort of like I feel like we still have like multiple timelines, right? Because like we're such complex beings, you know, maybe kind of like more simpler energetic beings on this planet have like one, but I feel like we have multiple timelines, and I think that like honestly, not to our benefit always, enhances the complexity. So say that like this is my timeline, and then maybe this is like my friend's timeline. We'll just like throw that out here. So do these timelines intersect? My honest feeling is like, yeah, I think they do. I think that like in order for you to kind of like meet people out in the world, and maybe it's like meet a job and also meet like a home, right? Technically your energies have to collide or intersect in one way, shape, or form, because then you are just sort of like co-creating its existence, which is actually quite cool to think about. And I wonder how this is sort of related to manifestation, right? Because like if you've got one energy of your friend who is manifesting an energetic experience that is matching yours, there's going to be such a clear channel for that to happen. So again, I think in a way it comes down to manifestation, and I want to be really clear that even if you're not consciously manifesting, you're subconsciously manifesting. But this energetic strength conversation is so interesting because it's very clear by this sort of like dissection that the stronger your resonant energy is, but more importantly, your manifestation energy, the more energetic support that you're going to have, likely the more movement that you're going to have, and you're going to have a lot more autonomy, ability, and control, right? Because I'm almost sort of like imagining this situation where someone has like a weaker energetic or like lower energetic vibration and they're not manifesting a lot. Ultimately, because we're sort of in this like gigantic like source energy like umbrella and sort of connection with each other, whoever has the strongest energy is going to really pave the way. And that pave the way might be for other people, but more importantly themselves. So my feeling is that timelines absolutely do collide, but then I guess the question is, what happens then? Is then there like a new timeline created? Oh, forgive me, I'll reach my time limit. What's really interesting is like, I think about this for a lot of like impactful people in my life. Like there's like life before this person and there's life after this person. So however you want to perceive it, a new timeline is created. So that's really interesting. My biggest question when going into this is kind of like how these timelines are created. And it's clear that it's manifestation, but what's also an interesting aspect to this is that if it's involving other energies, it also has to be that co-creation. What is also an interesting thought about this is like inanimate objects, right? Like, does a home have its own energy that it could like match with you? I almost wonder if like whoever is like working on the home, whoever's selling the home, whoever is sort of like wanting the home to go to someone has a say in that, right? Because if you're a channeler and you're channeling objects, they have an energetic resonance, but it's simply whoever has interacted with that object before. So it's not a surprise to me that items and objects have energetic resonance. And also think about it, like say for example that you're going to get a car, right? Whoever is like building that car is interjecting their energy into that car. So when I say that cars have soul and life, it's because they've taken on the energy from who made or used them before you, and also you as well. So I guess the interesting thing to think about here is, do these timelines become one? And now this may not be the best example, but say, oh, well, I shouldn't have erased that. So this is my timeline, and maybe this is my partner's, my love timeline, my partner's love timeline. And so we've done the manifestation and we've gotten them two together. What happens then? We've got the collide, right? So like this no longer exists. I don't have my eraser. Because my love timeline is now interacting. But I feel like they can't become one because we still have like our own ideas, energy, and autonomy. They're more like paired with each other. They're almost like next to each other. So maybe what happens is that there's parts of your timeline that can intersect and collide with each other and then come together, right? Because like, if we think about like maybe our experiences that the both of us share together, that's like a very bonded, shared, energetic experience, right? Like there definitely is crossover, but there's still this love existence that both people have because they're loving beings. Maybe ultimately the relationship ends, or we're not just talking about romantic love, right? Like I almost feel like it's this constant ebb and flow of like siloing as well as coming together and colliding and maybe becoming one, and then going back to sort of, disengaging or like splintering again. Because then the question is, if we've got, maybe there's like a couple of collided timelines that we have, maybe like super specifically, I have a romantic love timeline. That's down the umbrella from romantic love. Oh, great, my battery's gonna die soon. And, that is specifically coinciding with my partner's like romantic love timeline, but there's still other love timelines that are not about romantic love, right? That's a pretty broad category. So it's interesting. I think that all of the time we've got timelines which are coming together and which are splintering. And the question there is that good? I feel like yes, because I feel like now that we're getting very meta about this, colliding, coming together, as well as expanding and releasing timelines, this may be what we're supposed to do here. This may be the crux of our learning sessions, learning lessons. This may be the crux of our learning lessons. Understanding timelines, in my opinion, is how the world works, and is also integral to us understanding how we can continue to grow and evolve, and how we can continue to exist with these learning lessons that we're supposed to be dealing with and experiencing here in this lifetime. It's really interesting. My battery's gonna die, unfortunately. I can't talk much more about this right now, but I feel like we covered a lot with timelines. If you want to talk more about timelines or have other ideas or questions, just write me a comment and I'm happy to do a follow-up video with more concise information to questions. Thanks, bye!